Hey, massive good morning to you all. Thank you very much for joining me for our second 30-minute business entrepreneur session. This one on the topic of underpaid business owners. That sounds kind of tongue-in-cheek, and you'll understand a little bit more as I tell you what this topic is about. But there tends to be a kind of sensation from business owners that they don't get their worth, that they're not being paid what they think they kind of deserve from their business. And I want to kind of cover some of that and explain some of that as to why that happens and what maybe you can do to kind of make it easier for yourself. So today's session is kind of split into two parts. The first part is more really to do with the employees than the business owners. But the first thing we're going to talk about is about recruitment and salaries. So kind of your process of getting people to come and join your company and how you kind of promote the pay. We're always a little bit sensitive about pay, and generally we don't like people talking about it. And we don't like to talk about it. We kind of have a fear that we're underpaid, or a fear of finding out that other people are overpaid. I think between the two, that kind of paralyzes us. And it bleeds over into how we recruit, and when we recruit we kind of have that same hang up. Often pay is not structured, so we also see that when people employ new people to join their team, when they're looking to recruit, what they can pay somebody joining has an impact on the rest of the team that they're joining. As in, if you've got people within your team who are underpaid, how do you advertise a job where market dictates you need to advertise it for more money? If you recruit somebody for more money than your existing team, it's only a matter of time before they find out, and that causes kind of its own negativity. Pay reviews are very often about when people are upset enough they're considering leaving, and so people get a pay increase because they're kind of frustrated and are looking to kind of better themselves. And yeah, and sometimes I don't think people even think, employers don't think what they're saying when they advertise a job and what the impact is on the applicants. I'll run through some of what I've seen with that. Pay scales can work. You can have pay scales and they'll make sense. So again, we'll talk about what your pay scale is saying to an applicant and what you can do to make that work for you rather than against you. And then lastly, in part one, we're going to talk about behaviour modification. So this is to do with why an element of everybody's pay within your organisation should be based on their performance. So we'll talk a little bit about performance metrics and how they impact change, how they will modify behaviour. And then the second part of our session this morning is about the tease topic that I gave you about paying owners 3 times. It builds on what we've done in part one, and then we'll talk about the behaviour modification for owners because it works for them too. So that gives you a quick overview. We're going to be about 30 minutes. You're very welcome to post questions. I'll keep an eye on the questions panel. If you've got anything that I haven't answered within this, I'll kind of cover it off at the end and or as we go. But by all means, post stuff in the questions, post stuff in the chat, and I'll do what I can to make sure this is valuable for you. So on with part one. Let's kick off. This is a kind of job advert I just grabbed off of the internet. It could be any job advert. You see things like where this one says competitive under salary, that idea that the pay is going to be a competitive wage, but generally applicants know that kind of means they're going to have to apply for jobs, even though it may not be in the ballpark of what they're after. It means you're going to have to sift through CVs of people who are just chancing their arm. And it kind of says that you don't really want to pay any more than you have to pull somebody in. And that's probably the important thing here, is that competitive should mean that you're going to value their job experience, their education, the certifications, maybe the licenses that they have to work in your sector, the skills, the training, all of that great stuff. You should be able to put a value against and say, this is our competitive salary. But that's not typically how those you have an idea of what you'd love to get away with, and you know that you're going to have to stretch it and cause problems internally in your organization if you pay any more. And so you put competitive in the hope you're going to get a lot of CVs. So you run the risk of getting the wrong people applying, maybe too many people applying, so you've then got too many CVs to sift that maybe you didn't want to really be going through. So that's one to avoid if you can, but the alternative is to put a range. The risks with ranges, so if this says production supervisor and you're going to pay between 25 and 30,000 pounds, what does the job applicant see? And the job applicant probably sees, I could maybe get 30, but you're going to want to try and pay me 25. The reason why the job applicant will think that is because typically that's how it's been handled. When somebody comes in for the job, you're looking to see if you can pay them the bottom of your pay scale, not the top. 25,000 at the bottom of the pay scale is what you know you have to pay to be able to get anybody to come and work in that job. 30,000 is the dangly carrot that you're putting out there in the hope that you're going to get more CVs. You'll ask questions that will fish out what they're being paid in their previous job role in the hope that you don't need to pay them very much more to bring them to work for your organization. So I think that's key, but I want to give you another way. So remember we spoke about education, job experience, certification, licenses, skills and training, the things that you should be valuing. What about if we were to define those? What about if instead of saying the production supervisor 25 to 30, what about if we knew that a £25,000 production supervisor would have education up to about A level, would have a year's production experience, maybe a year's using a soldering iron. If it's electronics production supervisor, you know, they kind of know their industry, and maybe they started on their journey of some management qualifications, so they've got some low-level management qualifications. Then if we then defined what £30,000 looks like, well, if somebody turns up with a degree and they've got a load more experience and maybe a higher level qualifications, then that's your £30,000 applicant. So the interesting thing is once you've got this documented like this, what you really need to do is when you're looking at somebody, when you're sifting the CVs, anybody who doesn't have what matches your £25,000 job description, anybody who doesn't have that, you can remove them from the list. If you've advertised that's what you're after, you won't even get the CVs. Then at the top level, this is where it becomes key. You need to look at the person you're interviewing and decide whether or not they've got the makings of becoming that £30,000 employee, because you want to pay them 30,000. Why would you want to pay them £30,000? The answer is because they'd be better for the business. If you've set your goal that if you could get somebody with all of that, bringing all of that to the table, your business would be better off with it, then if you can't find that person, make that person, train them, develop them, get them where they need to be. So you're looking for somebody who's going to join your company, who's going to undertake to continue their professional development, to finish their management qualifications, to maybe do a little bit more training, to be able to get what they need whilst they get some more experience on the job, to be your production supervisor who would be able to drive your business success the way you want the success. So can you see that the value is how do I pay them 30 rather than how do I get away with paying them 25? Okay. And then the other part of that was to do with the productivity. I spoke about behavior modification, and again, that's really broad. The webinar we recorded last month, we did quite a lot on KPIs. That's on the YouTube channel. You can go back and watch that one. But we're talking about trying to look for the numbers that will drive the behavior for the employee. So, and we're looking at performance, not activity. We're looking at the things that they do well, the things they do right, rather than just the things that they do. So it would be the things that have got past the quality assurance rather than that they've just turned up for work and done the hours. We're not interested in the fact they've produced 100 widgets. We're interested in that they've produced 100 widgets that have passed quality control. One is performance and the other one is just an activity. If you reward just the activity, that's what you'll get. I've seen many people with telesales say, well, I need you to make 100 dials a day, and they'll make 100 dials. But if they're not connected to whether there's success of those dials, whether there's appointments being set or information being sent out or whatever the next step is, that's the bit you're measuring. Is actually, we kind of need you to be sending 10 brochures out a day. We don't mind how many dials it takes. If they're 10 dials and you send 10 brochures out, that's great. So what you need to do is to understand a little bit about the metrics that would drive the success of the person, and then pay them a proportion of their pay based on achieving. It doesn't have to be very much, by the way. When you talk about performance, we're not trying to turn them into coin-operated people. We're just trying to reinforce the behavior we want more of. The same as if you're training a child or a pet, you want to look for the bright spots, look for the things they do well, congratulate them because you want them to do more of it. Rewards don't even have to be money. Rewards can be things, can be the bonuses. So the other thing worth considering when you're thinking about employees is there's some advantages if the organization runs better, if your people work together as a team, reward the team success rather than just the individual success, or a mix of the both. So that's kind of a quick overview of the employee bits. And so what you can see is once you've got this as a system in place, you're paying people a base wage plus a performance bonus. You're paying your employees twice, and they deserve to be paid twice. That differentiates the people who just turn up for work and the people who turn up for work and make the business better. So we're looking for paying employees twice, which would, I say, individual or teams, or a mix of the two. Which brings us on to the second part of this, which was kind of the reason why you tuned in, about paying owners 3 times. I've kind of mentioned the 2, but we'll talk about it now. Pies are a finite size. You've got a piece of pie and you're going to share it somehow. You need to slice it up. And one of the problems that owners have is typically owner managing directors take a big slice of the pie and they feel kind of bad that they do. So, and the reason why they feel quite bad about this big slice of pie they're taking is because they typically take it as one slice. Nobody kind of notices when you go up to the buffet the second time, but they do notice if your plate is so full that stuff is falling over the side of it. Think like that. So let me give you a little business scenario. So here I've given you a few figures here of a fictitious business that's turning £2 million. It's running at 55% gross profit. It's running at 10% net profit. And because of its 10% net profit, leaving 200,000 of profit at the end of the year, with a 5 times multiplier, it's worth £1 million today. And this business has an aspiration to grow by 15% per year, 15% revenue, but also making sure they maintain 15% growth to their net profit, to the bottom line. This is our fictitious business. Now, I can tell you that the managing director of this business takes £174,000 a year in wages, in dividend, right? Out of that 200, he takes 174. How do we feel about that? He feels embarrassed. He feels it's kind of quite a large piece of the pie, and he would never want his staff to know that he takes £174,000 out of the business. Now, when I learn about that, I think, well, actually, that kind of makes sense. Now, let me explain why. The managing director is doing a job. He's a managing director. He's got responsibilities of a managing director, building the team and continuing to grow the business and looking out for the strategy and where the business needs to go. How much is that job worth? Let's say £50,000, right? So if you employed somebody to come in and do that job, if their only piece of the job was to do managing director of a business that's only turning 2 million and it's only dropping £200,000 to the bottom line, you're going to pay your managing director amount of money. Let's say that's 50,000. as an amount of money. Now, some of you watching this will be going, that's not nearly enough to pay a managing director. Okay, bear with me, you might be right. We've then got the performance. Now, the managing director is charged with delivering that growth profile. His role is to be able to get 15% growth year on year. It gets harder every year because that's a bigger number every year. Now, if he was rewarded for growing the business, let's say reward him £2,000 a month more, another 24,000. Let's give him 24,000 for achieving 15% growth. Okay, now that 15% growth is, he's taking most of the profit each year it's earned, but not the year after. The year after it's becoming profitable for the business. You can afford to pay him £24,000 because he's managed to bring in another £30,000 of net profit because he hit his 15% growth target. Okay, so this is somebody who's now earning £50,000 for being a managing director, that's turning up for work, and he's earning £24,000 more for being pretty good at it. The fact that he's driving the growth, which means that he's doing well with staff recruitment and training, and he's doing well with customer retention and all the really good strategic measures that drive the business. Okay, so that's his kind of 24,000. So what about the other 100,000? Well, he needs to be paid something for his risk. This is the owner managing director who owns a business that today is worth £1 million. He's put his £1 million into a business. If the owner wasn't the managing director, the owner would expect a return. If he put £100,000 into a business, would he expect to get a dividend? Well, yes, he would. And is a 10% dividend for the risk that he's taking by putting it into a small business a fair amount? Yes, it probably is. So actually, he's probably worth another £100,000 that isn't to do with being a managing director. It isn't to do with how the managing director is performing. It's to do with the fact that he's got £1 million at risk. Even in these troubled times, we're seeing that money invested in stocks and shares ISAs, which again are a risk, or money invested in the property market can give up to a 15% return. So paying him 100,000 as part of that, well, there you go. You've got 50, 24 and 100. That's your 174,000. As far as I'm concerned, that's the guilt almost gone, because they're three very separate things that the owner managing director is doing that are all deserving to be paid separately. If the owner was somebody else, they'd be paid. If you had to buy a managing director in, they would be paid. You wouldn't want to pay your managing director £74,000 to have a business that's reducing in size. So you would want to pay your managing director based on the performance. And all I'm saying is, whilst you're in your business and you are both the owner and the managing director, think like a bigger business where those things would not necessarily be the same person, and it kind of helps. So I think a large chunk of this is caused as confusion because there's an insistence for owners to take all of their money as dividends. They take all of their money off the balance sheet so as they can avoid paying national insurance. And although I'm sort of come through a business and that was exactly how I paid myself, what I'm asking you to do is, even if you pay yourself like that, is not to think like that. What you need to do is think about the fact that you're pulling multiple slices. So in the model above, you can see that that's where the figures are, and I've imposed there the owner's share, the grey piece. And what you can see is that when we split it, what we end up with is just a lot of little slices. So we can then see that actually the owner's piece isn't now the biggest piece, because there's so much else that's going on there. You know, there's a bunch of other things that are all being paid out. So it's kind of important to get your head around the fact that the owner and managing director is two entities, and pay them accordingly. So good. So that takes us on to my next slide here, which is about the key performance things that we spoke about before. So as I said, the managing director is going to be bonused around the top part of this pyramid. So the strategic measures, so things like the profitability and growth, that 15% figure, you may well pay yourself based on other things like not doing the churn. But I would suggest the key things are whether the business is performing financially the way you want it to. If you're not dropping an additional 15% net profit to the bottom line, if you're not creating another 15% of revenue, then I would suggest you're not achieving your strategic goals and you don't deserve that £24,000. If you employed a managing director, they wouldn't deserve the £24,000 that they're meant to be being paid for achieving your strategic goals. Again, don't allow yourself to be paid on activity. You can't be paid for dials. You can't be paid for just turning up for work. You need to be paid for achieving the goal. The advantage of you paying yourself for achieving the goal is the business grows, the business improves, and it allows you to pay the rest of your team what they're worth. As I said, this is about behavior modification. So this is about having a process like this makes you turn up to work knowing that you need to sign up those new customers, knowing that you need to make sure your sales team are doing what they're meant to be doing and your service is delivering as good as it's meant to deliver. All the things that a managing director should have a light but strategic touch over within their teams as the business continues to grow. So I think that's kind of covers most of what I wanted to put on here today. There is a footnote here about the fact that owner benefits, like employee benefits, are not always just about cash. You know, for an owner or for an employee, there's other things like holidays. Some people kind of value the idea of being able to take 5 weeks instead of 4, or the pension contributions being greater than the kind of minimum that the government dictate, or money going into private health plans for you or for your employees. So don't just get caught up in making the whole thing coin operated. Find the things that motivate you or your team and make those the rewards for the success that you're expecting out of people. I say it's too easy to get caught up thinking it's that everybody is coin operated, and they're not. And yeah, you kind of need to work with them to make sure that delivers. So concluding, as you know, I'm going to give you a shameless plug for my book. The topics I've talked about today are covered in my book in more detail. If you're a reader, it's available on Amazon for £11.95 and available across the country. I've now sold copies in a couple of European countries, America and Australia. So it's gently working its way around the world. Get your copy on Amazon and let me know what you think. These sessions, I'm doing 5 of these before Christmas. That's the end of the second one. The third one on the 19th of October is going to be around improving the meetings that you run within your business. So join me on the 19th of October, all again available via the Eventbrite booking. And I hope to see you on one of those soon. No questions coming in that I need to answer today, and I will leave it there. Thank you very much. Have the rest of an amazing day.